Hi, I'm Kevin Judah, along with Afshin Bernard, Vincent Charles, and Chris Jerry, and welcome to this week's edition of the nation's capital sports show, where it's most definitely on. Gentlemen, start your engines because we're going to talk about what we enjoy talking about the best and the most, and that is local and national sports. As you can see here, we have Steven Strasburg and, of course, Michigan. So we're going to not necessarily talk about those, but we are going to talk about the Nationals. But first, let's get started talking about basketball. NBA All-Star Weekend. We saw the West outlast the East, 148-138. MVP Chris Paul scored 20 points. And, of course, I got to ask you, gentlemen, did you catch any of the festivities, such as the rookies game and the three-point shootout and the skills game?
I actually, unfortunately, didn't really see much of it this past weekend. I usually watch all that stuff as much as I can, but this year I couldn't watch it.
Vincent?
I'll tell you, Kyrie Irving, that three-point shootout really did well. That guy is something.
So you did manage to watch a three-point game,
yes,
Vincent?
I did.
Chris.
Same thing.
All right.
Slam dunk and three-pointer. I got to catch a little bit.
And the slam dunk.
And the slam dunk. I just watched the game, man.
You did?
Yeah.
What did you think of the game?
And the game was okay, but nonetheless, you're always going to get a high-scoring, death-defying, high-scoring affair with the NBA game, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Let's talk about some of the competition within the All-Star Weekend. Anything that you would change? For example, anything in the rookies game, the slam dunk, three-point, or the skills game competition?
I don't know if I would change anything. I mean, you can always tweak here and there. One thing I would probably like to see is actually change the All-Star game itself if I am going to change something. Much like baseball and hockey, maybe because basketball is now an international sport, you could actually have North American players play international players in Europe and Asia, and something like I said, like baseball, maybe like the World Classic or in hockey that they used to do.
That's a good idea. Yeah. How about this? The D-League. D-Leaguers play against the rookies. And whoever, if the D-League wins, then of course the D-League will actually, the NBA will select a player from there to a partial contract.
I'll tell you, the D-League would sure be up for something like that.
That's right. They need all the help they can get.
Yeah.
How about this? The D-League wins and the rookies have to run laps.
I like that one too.
Oh, yeah.
Suicides.
Yeah.
That's right. So you got to like some of the things in which we see in the competition in the NBA, but some of those things obviously can be changed. Some of those things obviously you leave as is. And one of the things, of course, is the rookies game. You know, that's always good.
It's always good to see the young players. They get to actually showcase their own talents for a little bit, for one night out of the year, and that's not a bad thing.
Well, what about this, the slam dunk competition? Normally, you don't get the cameo players such as, I would say, the LeBron James. Those guys do not no longer participate in that for their own obvious reasons. But remember back in the day when Michael Jordan was around and you had Dominique Wilkins with the tomahawk dunk. You had those guys that would participate in it. Nowadays, why do these particular cameo players, they don't participate in it? Such as Kobe, too, we name him.
Oh, yeah, Kobe.
I think part of it has to do with the amount of money that these players now make. You know, there's so much concentration on, you know, don't go out and do something stupid and get yourself hurt. So I think that's one of the issues. And the other thing I think we tend to forget is these guys, even as they got to be more professional, like 4 or 5 years in, they stopped doing the dunk. You know, Jordan, everybody remembers, they're like, well, why couldn't they do that today? But Michael Jordan, by the time they got to the late 80s, he wasn't doing that. He was in the league for 4 or 5 years, but he wasn't doing any dunking.
That's right, and one of the reasons, too, where he actually participated 6 times in the slam dunk competition was because no one could beat him. And then on the last time when someone beat him, he kind of said, well, no longer for me. But I get your point, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dominique Wilkins was also very special. He participated in a few of them. And to me, he was, I thought, the best dunker of all time in the NBA.
That's right. I love it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Dr. Jerry Buss.
Yeah, he just passed away, and he was one of the good guys, I guess you could say, if you can call an owner of a major sports franchise a good guy. He started really dirt poor, and he made his way out to become owner of the Los Angeles Lakers.
That's right. He brought the Lakers from the late Jack Kent Cooke, who was the owner of, the former owner, I should say, of the Washington Redskins, too.
Well, it goes back, the thing I remember about him, going back to my college days in Los Angeles, he bought the team in 1979. And at that time, I was working for KMPC Radio in Los Angeles. And so on occasion, you know, I'd be around where the Lakers were or what have you. And this guy had a whole different idea of what he wanted the game to become. It wasn't any of this kind of old organist kind of thing. He had the idea for the Laker girls. And really, pretty much the NBA that we see today all comes out of that Lakers Showtime era, that started right there in 1979-80 when Bus took over the team.
Funny you should mention that. The Los Angeles Lakers are akin to what they are akin to what the Yankees are in baseball.
Right. The NBA is, what, maybe 70 years old? They've been to the finals half of that time. The Los Angeles Lakers franchise has been to the finals, I think, 34 or 35 years, and they've won about 16, 17 championships. It's an amazing feat for one franchise. They truly are a storied franchise. But getting back to what Chris said, Jerry Buss also was the initiator of having those halftime shows, those timeouts where you can get a fan to come out of the stands and shoot a half-court shot. That's when all that started, too. He really put the word entertainment into the game of basketball.
So we're talking in terms of Jerry Buss being one of the visionaries of basketball, Vincent.
Most of the players that you talk to on the Lakers have nothing but good things to say about Jerry Buss. He was one of those owners that really treated his players well, and they really respected him and liked him.
Let's mention Magic Johnson, one of the key players in which Dr. Jerry Buss was very fond of, Chris.
Yeah, they were very, very tight, and of course, you know, that was the guy that signed him to his first contract. At the time, when Magic Johnson was drafted, Jack Kent Cooke actually owned the team, and
That's
then
right.
Jack Kent Cooke sold the team to Jerry Buss, and so they've had this close relationship. After Magic left the game shortly with the HIV virus, Magic was able to buy a portion of the team. He encouraged Magic to get into businesses, and we know what kind of businessman he is today. And even the latest thing that Magic Johnson has done, buying into the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team, he was encouraged also by Dr. Buss.
That's right. And no telling when they unveil the reading of the will, who knows? Dr. Buss may give a little good stuff to Magic Johnson.
He might give a little love to Magic Johnson, and Magic Johnson is quick to point out that he is not the holder of 5 NBA championships. As you pointed out, he was minority owner. He's the holder of 10 NBA championships. Yeah. So you never know, Kevin. He could be in that will at the end of the day.
That's right. Well, at the end of the day, Vincent, Dr. Jerry Buss was one of the prominent owners in the NBA who harkened back to the old days with a handshake. One of the few owners that if he gave you a handshake, his word was bond.
Yes, it certainly was, and things were a lot different back then. But he was a visionary, and like we've discussed here, had a lot of good ideas and good plans for the Lakers and the league.
That's right.
Yeah, part of that deal that you're talking about, Kevin, was actually the Magic Johnson deal. In order for it to come to complete fruition, Jack Kent Cooke had to draft Magic Johnson in order for that sale to be made to Jerry Buss. He wanted Magic more than anything, and he got the guy from East Lansing, Michigan. That's
right. And how much was that deal again? One of the highest deals at the time?
$67.5 million. That was not just for the Lakers, but the Kings and the Great Western Forum, all three, I think, right, Chris?
So it was all three. It was $67 million. And the thing is, at that time, that was a record.
That was a
record for a professional franchise.
And nowadays, that's right. I was going to say that's a contract, man. Nowadays, but man, he got a dirt cheap deal.
And to keep it local, the guy that got the money, the Squire, Jack Kent Cooke. That's who we bought the team from.
That's right.
Jack Kent Cooke.
Well, gotta love NBA basketball. A little bit about the Wizards not doing pretty good for this before the break, and perhaps we don't expect them to do any better after the break. But I shouldn't say that. But we wish them the best of luck.
Yeah, they've actually done a little bit better since John Wall's come back, but you know, it's the Wizards, and they'll be a lottery pick. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, they actually, you know, you got to give them a little credit. Yeah. Since Wall has played, they played a little better. I think on our last show, I was rooting for them to do terrible so they could get a good draft pick. But I think they're playing really hard right now, and I don't think they're going to end up with the worst record in the NBA. They'll probably be, you know, somewhere maybe 5th or 6th best record in the league, which is saying quite a bit given the way they started.
That's right. Sure enough is.
Yeah, they're, you know, a bad team, but John Wall makes them a little bit better. Bradley Beal makes them a little bit better. And they actually make them go, and I agree, Chris. I mean, they really do work their butts off. They work hard on the court.
Well, all they need now is just a little Wizard luck going on there for them. Let's talk a little bit about the Washington Capitals. Let's talk about the Winter Games.
Oh, the Winter Games will be in Sochi in 2014, and I know that there's a little bit of concontroversy right now with the Caps involved in that.
And the big question is, of course, Adam Oates, the head coach of the Washington Capitals, said if he had his druthers, none of the Capitals would get to participate in the Winter Olympics, and the reason is because he feels like if you get a key player like Ovechkin that gets injured, you're going to lose your player. However, the other side of this, Chris, is Ted Leonsis came out and he supports Ovechkin playing in the Olympics and says he gets his full support.
Well, and I too support Ovechkin playing. That's nice for Adam Oates to say, you know, he's a Canadian. They won the gold medal the last time when they played in Vancouver. But the fact is, this time the Olympics will be in Russia, and that's an important thing for the Russian national team and especially for Ovechkin. So I applaud Ted for saying, like, hey, even if all the NHL players aren't released, Alex would be released to play for his country.
All right, I want to kindly remind everyone that you're watching the Nation's Capital Sports Show on Arlington Independent Media, Comcast 69 and Fios 38. You can catch us on Facebook.com as well. Afshin.
Yeah, Alex is going to want to play, and he's going to have that right to play, and I agree with Alex Ovechkin too. Go play. And he wants to play in his mother country. There's no problem with that at all, in my mind.
Vincent.
I support Leonce's decision, and people have to realize a lot of these hockey players are foreign-born, and playing for their country is a big thing. And I think we as Americans have to respect that. And I'm all for them playing in the Olympics.
All right, we're going to let Vincent have the last one on that, but we're going to talk about the Capitals now. They are 5-9-1 or something to that nature. Not a bad record to have because the rest of their division is also kind of like in the points, point-wise, is kind of like in the druthers too.
Yeah, the Capitals I think have 11 points, and they're behind the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I think are in first, but only like 6 points behind them. Whereas you look at other divisions, there's a 10, 12-point gap. So the Capitals are still in good shape, even though they're in last place. They're in good shape not just for a playoff push, but to win the Southeastern Division as well.
Yeah, actually, it's the Hurricanes that they're behind. And at the end of the day, because they too got off such a bad start for the first 3 weeks of the season, they had the worst record in the NHL. So only be 11 points back, and there's still 3/4 of the season to go. They're not in a bad shape.
We said before too, Kevin, when we brought up hockey, when they finally solved the lockout, that if the Capitals are going to get into a slump, get into it at the beginning of the season.
That's right.
You can still pull your way out.
We talked about that.
Yeah, and they got into a big slump.
That's right. And who holds the highest wins in all of NHL in the hockey?
Well,
I think there's a team on the West Coast, right?
Well, in the Western Conference, I think it's the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, it's Chicago. Yeah.
Undefeated right now, 12 wins, and they have 3 tie losses, but that doesn't count as a loss. So they're one game really, Kevin. If they should win or get a loss in overtime, they will set a record in the NHL for the fastest start to a season.
Right.
All right, we're going to let Vincent have the last word on this.
Well, the Capitals are definitely going to have to pick it up. Good that they're still close, but each game is so much more important now that the season is such a shortened season. So, they can't have too many losses coming up.
That's right, and now is the time for them to do something, and actually they're doing something now. So rocking the red.
Yeah, they are. That. And Braden Holtby has really proven his point to be the netminder in my mind.
That's right. He's actually leaving off where he left off last season.
Yeah.
Ebullient performance, superb goal minder. I mean, you got to like what you see.
He's been good the last few games. He was getting off the little shaky start down, but I think he's done enough that he should tell Adam Oates, or this should lead Adam Oates to determine that he is the #1 netminder for the Capitals. That's who should be in the net most of the time.
All right, we're going to let Chris have the last word on this. I lied. All right, this is the Nation's Capital Sports Show where it's most definitely on. I'm Kevin Jeter. He's Chris Jerry, Afshin Banab, and of course, Vincent Charles. Coming up next, we're going to talk about what we enjoy talking about the best and most, and that is baseball. Steven Strasburg and the Nationals down in Florida. Spring training springs hope eternal, I should say. And that and much, much more here on the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. Hi, I'm Kevin Jeter, along with Afshin Banab, Vincent Charles, and Chris Jerry, and welcome back to the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's most definitely on. Let's continue our discussion on sports and talking about those Washington Nationals hanging out in Vieira, Florida for spring training, Afshin.
Yeah, baseball's finally back, and I'm looking forward to it. And we'll see what the Nationals can do this coming season after that great year they had in 2012.
Now, speaking of great year, Vincent, manager Davey Johnson said this is the year that the Washington Nationals will give him his going away send-off present, the World Series.
World Series or bust. I agree with him. Cautious optimism, though. I think they're capable of 100 wins. But after having that letdown in the playoffs last year, I think that, they're experienced in the postseason now, and they'll come into the postseason, providing they make it, with a better attitude.
All right. Thanks a lot, Vincent. Chris, well, that's all well said and true, but if the Braves and, of course, the Marlins and the Mets and the Phillies have anything to do with it, that's not going to be so necessarily easy for the Washington Nationals.
Well, I wouldn't worry about the Marlins and I wouldn't worry about the Mets, but I do think the Braves with now the Upton brothers in the outfield, and I think the Phillies being the Phillies, you know, Phillies just had a lot of things go wrong with them last year, so I expect them to be right there at the top fighting with the Nationals along with the Braves. So I think those are the two teams, Kevin, that the Nationals need to watch out for this year.
Interesting about the Phillies, in the last season they made some wholesale changes. They got rid of some key players, but you got to like the way they look this year.
You do. I like the way the Philadelphia Phillies look, and let's remember they still have Halladay, they still have Hamels, they still have Cliff Lee.
That's right.
Howard was hurt last year, Utley was hurt. They brought in Michael Young from Texas this year. With Jimmy Rollins, they're going to have a decent infield, and if those starting pitchers remain healthy, then Philadelphia will be the team to contend with. And let's not forget Jason Hayward is that outfield with Atlanta. That's
right.
going to be one of the best outfields in the game.
And the best pitching, maybe the best pitching, the best pitching may be within the Nationals for the National League East.
That's true too. I mean, you know, you got your guy right here.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Gio Gonzalez. And they have a good pitching staff, the Washington Nationals do. John Lennon, I think, is actually in Philadelphia, too, so he may be a 4 or 5 starter up there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Maybe a Nats killer, I don't know.
Yeah, and, you know, Davey Johnson said that, and, you know, I think every manager should at least think that for your own team. Whether you believe it or not is one thing, but you got to say it for your team. You want to get your team that energy going right off the bat.
Well, Vincent opened up my question and says that he does believe, B-E-L-I-V-E-E, I-E-V-E. I mean, he does believe that the Nationals will be able to make it to the World Series. Is that what you said?
Certainly do.
That's right.
Yeah. And speaking of pitching, guys, let's not forget the addition to the bullpen, Rafael Soriano. Him and Tyler Clippard and Storin. The Nats are going to be bad in the bullpen.
Well, they'll have a good,
Oh, they're going to have a good season. So we'll see how they develop, and we'll keep everyone up abreast in terms of the Washington Nationals as spring training develops. And, of course, starting opening day, which is on April the 1st.
April 1st.
Yeah, I mean, no joke.
No joke. You're not fooling anybody.
I'm not fooling anybody. April 1st, April Fool's Day. All right. Let's talk a little bit about cheating in sports, one of my favorite things. I mean, well, we're not going to talk about the PED, which is performance enhancement drugs. I mean, everyone is aware of that. That's where you get an unfair advantage against your opponents. But we're going to talk about cheating in football and in baseball. Let's talk about the infamous Stickum. Remember Stickum from the 80s and from the 70s? It was this sticky elixir that actually running backs used to hold on to the ball, wide receivers used to catch the ball and hold on to it, but eventually it was an unfair advantage.
Yeah, they did use it, especially those wide receivers when it was real cold, and they would use it on their gloves way back in the day. I remember Cliff Branch would say, yeah, I'm using Stickum.
That's
right. It was actually, in a way, it was legal back then. Maybe not in the spirit of the game, but it was legal, and they would use it and to gain that advantage.
But the funny thing happened, because every good thing must come to an end, when you had defensive players begin to use it to hold back offensive players.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, the Raiders probably took it to art form, and I think the guy that really ended up getting that just taken away was Lester Hayes, because he had so much of that junk on him that, I mean, the grass was sticking to his uniform that he had so much on. But
that's right.
But that's they changed the rules and said you couldn't do that anymore. So what happened was these companies started developing gloves that almost had the same effect that you could catch the ball with.
Hey, Vincent.
You guys are right. I agree. Oakland Raiders were notorious for that stuff. George Atkinson, I remember all those guys. They were big time.
And now you can watch the YouTube videos. When I was actually planning this segment, you can watch the Oakland Raiders where they stick them and you see their hands like that and the
like a
big
gel.
gooey and gel. Let's talk about another thing in football. Vaseline. Man, I would love to brought stock in the Vaseline petroleum at that time during the 60s and 70s, because Vaseline was used for...
Yeah, offensive and defensive linemen, a lot of them used it. And the Redskins were also notorious for that way back during the over-the-hill gang time under George Allen, where the offensive linemen or the defensive linemen for the Redskins actually would wear it. So the offensive linemen of the opposing team, when they tried to hold them, they actually couldn't hold them. Their hands would slip off the jersey, they'd end up falling, and then you'd see somebody try to go get a sack or something. But of course, that was eliminated pretty quickly.
Chris.
Yeah, that's true. And Yeah, and the holding rules were different back then. So, yeah, there's always little tricks of the trade, and there are still tricks of the trade that they still do now that kind of skirts the rules.
That's right. Oh, do tell one of these days, Vincent.
There certainly are, Chris, and you know, a lot of it is unspoken between the players. As long as they can get away with it, they'll do it.
That's right. That's right. Let's talk about baseball. This is my favorite. You know how I'm going to get excited about this. We got the cork bats, scoff balls, and of course the alleged cheating done in the 1919 Black Sox series that saw 8 members of the Black Sox get disbanded from baseball forever, including the infamous Shoeless Joe.
Yeah, Shoeless Joe Jackson was one of those there. But Shoeless Joe had a good series. He was, I think, batting .375 with 12 hits and 4 home runs. But they said his defense was what did him in, because they had about 8 balls that went out his way in that series that could have been singles that he left for, that apparently went for doubles and even triples. So I don't know, but Shoeless Joe is on that list, and there was a whole lot of people, especially in baseball.
That's right. Ty Cobb, the infamous Ty Cobb, for intents and purposes, he was allegedly one of the first players that sharpened his cleats. And so when he went sliding into second base, he said no one bothered him, you know.
Yeah, that's true. All those guys, they had those things. I mean, especially when you go way back, that they got the little tricks of the trade. But again, it's like, you know, honor among thieves, because all the players did that kind of stuff. But Ty Cobb was especially really nasty with the things he did.
That's right. What about the cork bat? Notably, Sammy Sosa.
Sosa
was actually was caught using a cork bat.
Yeah, one time
there's no alleged in that.
No,
go ahead, continue
it's not allegedly. It was. I think they were playing at Wrigley Field, and he hit a ball, and I think the bat broke, and the umpire picked up the bat and looked at the bat, and there was a cork inside it.
And he said, yeah, he was saying it was batting practice. But you know what?
Yeah, he said it was a batting practice.
But the other thing, if you remember, when Albert Bell was playing with Cleveland, and they ended up throwing a bat of his. He didn't break it, but they threw it out. And the story is there were people on the Indians clubhouse that crawled up through the roof to go into the umpire's locker room to take the bat that had been confiscated because they didn't want that bat checked, because the belief was it was caught.
And what about stories such as scoff balls, where actually the pitcher would have sandpaper or foul in their pocket? And then, of course, you had a pitcher that would normally not have a good slider or curved ball. All of a sudden, the umpire would say, "Hey, that's kind of looking, you're looking good there, a little better than normal." And so the ump would stop the game, walk up to the pitcher. But while the pitcher was actually trying to, get the missed attention from the ump, the pitcher would drop the
emery board.
Exactly, and then the first baseman would walk up, and while the ump was actually talking to the pitcher, the first baseman would stick his cleats over the emery board, and then basically the ump would check the pitcher out and say, "Hey, you're okay." But then the pitcher would the first baseman would bend down and tie his shoes, and then lift up his shoes or cleats, and then sneak the emery board or sandpaper into his pocket.
It's been going on for a long time. It reminds me of Gaylord Perry doing something like you just described. He was, to me, notorious for it. I think sometimes umpires would just stop the game for a second just to make sure he didn't have anything under his hat or in his pockets or under his foot that he might have been stepping on something.
And that's right. And Vincent, we talk about this in baseball. It's kind of like if you get caught, it's a bad thing, but it's kind of like one of those folklores in baseball where cheating is not okay, but it's kind of accepted a little bit.
Pitchers, like you say, they've been notorious over the years, and there's all kind of ways, whether it's something they wear in their hair, or they scuff the ball with a fingernail, or anything that they can do to try to get the edge to get that ball to move to their advantage.
Well, I think a lot of that is kind of subsided, because the other thing that's changed as we talk about these cheaters or these little kind of skirting the rules is television has become so complicated now, because now you've got a TV camera that can actually focus in, especially with high-def cameras.
That's right.
They can focus in on the glove, they can focus in on everything and say, okay, hey, look, this looks a little bit different. And so these things that they could do back in the day when TV wasn't as big a deal, is much more difficult to do now.
And by the way, kids that play Little League, do not cheat.
Okay.
Good advice.
That's right. I'm just saying there. But it's interesting about baseball. It's one of the things that perhaps we're talking about the 1919 Black Sox. That was the first episode that allegedly led to cheating in baseball and gambling in baseball, so to speak. Brings us current to Pete Rose 30 or 40 years later.
Yeah, actually, I think the Black Sox or the Chicago White Sox of 1919 were playing your Cincinnati Reds.
That's right.
So how ironic it is, many, many decades later, that Pete Rose of the Cincinnati Reds is now still, after all these years, embroiled in whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame.
That's
But
right.
to be fair, that Black Sox scandal never would have happened if Charlie Comiskey wasn't such a cheap.
That's true. He was a big cheater.
cheap.
No, he was a
Didn't
cheap
wanna
cheater.
pay.
And one of the stories, Chris, you actually talked about it when we were having our planning for the show about Ty Cobb, and it's not kind of a funny story, but it's kind of like kind of sad.
Well,
the
story, Kevin, the story goes that when Ty Cobb was playing in a game, and there was a man heckling him from the stands. And so Cobb, being the nasty guy he was, went over and beat up this guy that was heckling him in the stands. Well, turns out the guy in the stands had no hands. And so people were pulling Cobb off of him and saying, hey, what are you doing? This guy's got no hands. And Cobb says, I don't care if he got no feet.
Oh, man. Strangest things.
Sad.
Stranger things have happened.
Yeah.
Wow. Gotta love that about baseball.
Yeah, I think these things have happened more in baseball, and there's more of a history in baseball than any other sports, at least as far as we know.
That's right.
You know?
But Chris brought up a good point. Nowadays, with the cameras that you have going on television, there's no way that players can get away with that, especially cork bats. Who would have the nerve to do that? You know.
I bet Sammy Sosa might try.
Which explains why, in your humble opinion, he may not. He's not worthy of getting into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Well, that's just one of the reasons, right?
That's one of them. Yes.
All right, Vincent.
Well, there's always going to be guys trying to skirt the rules, trying to do their best to think they're within the rules, but still trying to get the advantage. I mean, you're always going to have that, and baseball especially.
Yeah, and I think, too, one thing as a society that we've probably changed a little bit of, especially out of the PEDs, is we probably now kind of frowned a little bit on cheating. I'm not sure now, if the Gaylord Perrys of the world existed now, what would, as baseball or society in general say? Because we romanticize that. Gaylord Perry is in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, he is.
And it was a lot of jokes when he went in the Hall of Fame about the fact that he used to throw spitballs and cheat and all that kind of stuff. But I think we're at a point now where, because of little kids watching or whatever, any kind of cheating is kind of frowned upon. So I think that's helped to reduce it some too.
All right, we're going to let Afshin have the last word on this.
I agree.
Vincent?
No, I do.
All right.
Your point is well taken, especially the point about the media nowadays. And when you speak about Gaylord Perry, yes, with all the Twitter and all the Facebook and everything else like that, who knows? If that was the case back then in Gaylord Perry's day, maybe he wouldn't have made the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And I feel, once again, I let Vincent have the last word because you agreed. That was too short for me. But I digress nonetheless. We thank you for listening to and looking at the Nation's Capital Sports Show, which you can listen to us on the award-winning Stitcher Radio Network. Check us out on Stitcher.com. Check us out on iTunes. Check us out on the Liberated Syndicated Network. Pause and take a deep breath. And also you can check us out on our fan book page at Facebook.com, especially right here on Arlington Independent Media, Comcast 69 and Files 38. For the Nation's Capital Sports Show, I'm Kevin Jeter, along with Afshin Bernard, Vincent Charles, and Chris Jury. But before we get out of here, you're going to pay tribute to our staff that keeps us honest.
Absolutely. Of course, our producer is Devin Gallagher. Our director is Charles Smith, Kevin Sampson, Ken Briley, Steve Cordell, Jonathan Kim, Sally Gilistino, Kimberly Phillip, and J.R. Stewart. The last three are our camera operators, and they make us look good.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. This is the Nation's Capital Sports Show, where it's always on. Take care.